ladies and gentlemen, I have been asked to say if you got any leavings or leftovers like plastics or things or whatnot like that can be used over, or aluminum that can be used for making our flyboys fly again, then you just put that in the recycling over that way. And there's a box for the plastics and boxes for whatnot especially. And if you do that, then they can be reused. And I like leftovers. Leftovers are what makes this community go. I have also been asked, since this is being recorded for posterity, and I'm not going to talk to my posterior, but to posterity. So if you could just settle down a little bit and keep a little bit quieter, then we'll pick up a better signal for the television folk what are recording this. My name is Nettie, and I have been asked to talk a little about what I remember of McGaffey growing up. I have to confess that my memory has not been as good of late, but I will not stop that from keeping me from talking, because if there is one thing that I do enjoy, it is to keep my mouth flapping. I was around McGaffey, born here in 1904. I still remember being told not to play too close to the sawmill. Of course, it made enough noise half the time that it didn't exactly make you wanna. I remember when I was almost out of school, and I heard about one of the Cantner boys getting killed in France. Palmer, I think, was his name. You know, we didn't have many boys from McGaffey in the war, and it was a big deal when somebody passed. But it wasn't just the boys that were passing. There were mothers and sisters and daughters that when they had babies were putting themselves at risk. And I know of several mothers who have passed, given childbirth. I myself, when I was pregnant with mine, was worried about whether I was going to survive the pregnancy. We didn't call it pregnancy at that time, but I have grown in my old age. If you were with child, it was not always a blessed occasion until it was all said and done. Until you knew you were home and you were recovering, it was not a celebration. Because more often than not, there was a good chance you wouldn't be coming home with that baby. Or if the baby came home, it may not be with you. My mother died when I was very young. I was about 7. My daddy did not know how to raise girls, and there was me and a couple of sisters. And one day, he brought home a couple of bolts of yard goods from the commissary. And it was this calico print. One of them was black and white. The other was kind of a lavender color and white. And I knew a bit about sewing by the time I was around 13, but he had a lady that took in sewing come over to the house, and she used my mama's sewing machine and sewed a bunch of dresses for us all. Of course, they all looked a lot alike, so it was real easy to pick us out of a crowd. But she did manage to make some different styles, so at least you could tell which dress belonged to which of us. And that was helpful. Otherwise, there would have been some fights. I left McGaffey when I was 18 and lived in Gallup for a time. I worked at a hospital for a while, and then I got married to a fellow, and we moved back to McGaffey because he had a job working for the lumber mill. Sometimes he started out working in the cotton in the woods, and then he would work in the sawmill at other times, and eventually worked in the sawmill all the time. It was in 1929 that things started to change. We didn't know they were changing, except that Mr. McGaffey went and got himself killed. He had a couple of sons, Hubert and Neil, and I think they were adopted. To look at them, they didn't look like they came out of the same corral, if you get my drift. But Hubert had been in the Army Corps, and he told Mr. McGaffey, his name was Amasa, but everybody called him Amos. So Amos' son, Hubert, said, you got to get with it, and you got to start flying. Well, McGaffey, he lived most of the time in California, and he didn't stay here at the mill when he was visiting. He usually stayed at the inn in Albuquerque, Harvey House. I don't know if he had a thing for the Harvey girls. I don't want to get close to that. But he took his son's advice, and he decided he would try a trip. And there was this service on a Ford Trimotor from the Transatlantic Air something or other. They call themselves TAT. And he got his son to let him off at the airfield in Albuquerque. He got on that Ford Trimotor, and it took off and went missing that afternoon. Turned out he got killed in the crash. Turned out that was the first commercial airliner crash in the history of the United States. And Mr. McGaffey was on that plane when it crashed. Well, that was the start of the end for the sawmill and for a lot of what was happening in McGaffey. I mean, it didn't happen all at once. Mr. Horvin kept things going. But there was a fellow, one of his foremen, that ran the sawmill. His name is Burke, and he was really fond of building these fancy cars that would go fast, and he managed to crash one of them cars and got himself killed just a couple of months after Mr. McGaffey died. So his replacement was one of the young boys that had worked around the mill, and he took over the foremanship. I think his name was Heiser or something, whatnot. Well, it was February of the following year, 1930, and they had this power outage. Now, the carriage run into the bandsaw. That instead of using this big, round, circular blade, the sawmill uses a big band blade, like a bandsaw, just looped around. And the feed for the carriage stopped. It stalled. Somehow the electric power went out. And this young kid, this Heiser, was getting up in front of the carriage to check on things. Power came on, and that carriage whipped him right into the blade and cut him to pieces. So he was gone. So within just a period between end of September of 29 and the middle of February of 30, we'd lost 3 of the most important people around the sawmill. And Mr. Horvin, he ran the commissary and a few other posts around the area. He eventually did all kinds of things, started shutting down businesses. There was a village just down the piece across the railroad tracks from McGaffey, Torreon, mostly Mexican immigrants. And they would work they came here to work. But they weren't given lodging. They had to build it themselves. Now, the lumber company would give them all the scraps they wanted, and they built their little lodges. Some of them didn't look bad, but they were clearly built pretty much on the spur of the moment. It was like a homestead village, Torreon. And as things began to close down and the migrant workers left, you're left with a lot of unoccupied buildings in Torreon. Forest Service came in. They burned the whole mess down. Now, they may have burned the place down, but the memories of the people that were there were still with us. I still remember folks like the Montoyas. I learned about tortillas from them, and there were Slavic folks that lived in McGaffey about that made that fancy Polish bread, the powatica with cinnamon. Oh, that was good at Christmas. And we had such a large variety. Now they would call it diversity. But we had people from all different kinds of places that would work at these camps. McGaffey was a beautiful place. When the lake was full of water, which it was not too long ago that it was full of water. You could get water for your wash. They could feed it. They had it pumping so that people could get it out of a faucet and carry it to their house. It was really up to date in McGaffey. We had a school at one time. We had about 100 students at that school. But as things began to close down, as the sawmills began to close, as the jobs went away, people began to move out. And eventually, some of us didn't live here anymore. We'd move into Gallup, or some people would move even further away. And we lost a bit of what we had here. But we still have those memories. I remember around this time of the year we were getting ready for the 4th of July. And around McGaffey, the 4th of July was one of the biggest holidays of the year. I could hardly wait to see the rodeo and go to the dances. I remember some of the Indian folk, they'd have this thing they called a chicken pull. And the way that worked was you'd have your horse, and they'd kind of have a chicken kind of half buried, and you'd have to ride your horse in and lean over and grab that chicken out of the dirt. Now, I don't know of any white folks doing it, but it was something to see. We had the goat roping. That was something special. And that was something that you'd see the Mexicans and the white folks and all sorts participating in. We made our own music around here. Now, I never really did play much of anything, but I knew boys that could play the little concertinas and guitars. A few folks that had little banjos that they'd made. I don't think they called them banjos, though. And there were no speaker systems or fancy auditoriums. You just played loud enough and got people in close enough that you could hear what they were doing and dance to it. And some of those dances were a sight to behold. And the dance hall down the road was very popular. Saturday nights, those were big occasions, many times of the year. Now, I said 4th of July was important. Yeah, it's true. And Christmas had its moments. You know, we had quite a few Catholic folk here. But for us, I think Christmas, we'd have the school programs, we'd have a few things. But now that I'm pretty close to the 4th of July, I'm thinking how much we really did enjoy that time. I don't remember a lot of firecrackers or things like that, but I do remember the rodeos, and I do remember getting together and having fun with folks. It was hard for me to leave McGaffey, and always wonderful when I got to come back and visit. It was sad to see buildings torn down with the years. It was sad to see the changes, but if there's one thing that we've seen, life is about change. People have started calling McGaffey a ghost town, and I think that's wrong. Because to me, a ghost town means that there's some kind of haunting going on, and I never felt scared of anything here. For me, I think if there's haunting, it's the memories of those that we've lost and the memories of those that we've known, and memories of the way McGaffey once was. It makes me feel good that there was a time that the community did hold together and made something of this place, and such a beautiful place as it is. And I do miss that time, and I do miss the people who have passed on. But their legacy is here every time you look here and you see the old school, or you see the writings of people who have left their testimonies. I want to return to McGaffey. I want to live here forever. Thank you.